And the turbidity current, as we have discussed, it is a low concentration sediment gravity flow, and one of the most important deep water sedimentation process, because as you know that in the depth of the ocean, after you go below the wave base, there is no agent, very few agent, which can transport the sediment. One major agent which can transport sediment in the deeper part of the ocean is the turbidity current. So turbidity current, it is first it was recognized in the Swiss Alps. In the Swiss Alps, it was originally identified that there are thick, hundreds of meter thickness succession of alternate sandstone and shale. And at that time, about about 70, 80 years back, when the concept of turbidity current was not there, but there were paleontologists. These paleontologists, what they did, they tried to interpret how these hundreds of meter thick succession of the sandstone shale is being formed, where sandstones are always showing the shallow water fossil and the shales are showing the deep water fossil. Now, if sandstones are yielding the shallow water fossil and shale are yielding the deep water fossil, and together, and none of the sandstone bed is more than a meter thick, Now, this succession for hundreds of meters in the Swiss Alps. Now, there the confusion started. How the shallow water fossil and deep water fossil, they are alternating in such meter scale. What can be the possible reason that a sea level transgression regression cannot be possible in that meter scale? It is unimaginable. So the people were bothering that how to explain this kind of succession where a meter thick sandstone shale alternation, sandstone yielding shallow water fossil, shale yielding deeper water fossil, what really is the reason behind it? The solution came in the process of turbidity current explanation. That the turbidity currents, it is coming by means of any kind of shock. If the shock can be a seismic shock which can trigger a turbidity current, it can be a slope failure, it can be a slope over-steepening, or any other kind of process which basically start generating the low density turbidity current. And as we have seen by the equation, that as long as the density difference between that turbidity current and the ambient water, that remains, the current persists. That means it is a current which is capable of moving even in a very low gradient, the abyssal floor. Low gradient abyssal floor, because as long as the density difference is there, it will go on moving. There is no problem that what is the available slope or what is the depth of the flow. So that is one of the, but one thing you must remember, because the turbidity current, it is operating in the deep ocean, in the bathyal zone, in the abyssal plane, and there is no restriction of space, because the flow expands and no restriction of space. So normally the product of turbidity current, they should not be very thick. It should be, because if you increase the area, the total volume of sediment, that will only cause a less thickness of the body. So most of the turbidites that is reported around the globe, they are found to be less than a 1 meter thickness. So and we also discussed that the turbidity current, they have a general density of 1.1 to 1.2 gram per cc, and they form a product which we known as the BOMA sequence. There is lot of challenge about the BOMA sequence also. I will not come into that. There is a famous person in US, Indian born, G. Shanmugam. He questions the BOMA cycles a lot. I am not going into that. Whatever is written in the book, I am confining into that. I am not going into beyond the book, what is in the publication and the literature. The BOMA cycle has been heavily questioned. Anyway, still our knowledge as it goes, that we consider that the BOMA cycle is the product of a turbidity current. Okay. Now, There are proximal turbidites, there are distal turbidites. What are the characters of the proximal turbidites? Proximal turbidites, as I discussed, that there will be more bed amalgamation, there will be relatively thick, there will be more sandwich to shell ratio, and you will get the fluid erosional surface such as flute cast. This is what I discussed, and that most of the sequences in the proximal turbidites, it will be a top truncated sequence. Top truncated sequence. What is the meaning of top truncated sequence? That means you will mostly get the TA, TB or TA, TBC. TA, I will write the top truncated sequence, that will be TA, TAB, TABC, or we also call TA to C. So the top truncated sequence, they will be TA, TAB, TABC or TA to C. These are the all. That means you are not getting the subdivision D or E. That those are you are not getting. Whereas in a distal turbidite, you will be getting TC to E, TCD, TD. These are the distal turbidites. That they will be bottom truncated. They will be bottom truncated. So that is another character, that the proximal turbidites are top truncated, and the distal turbidites, they will be mostly the bottom truncated. Okay. So once we discuss the turbidity current, then our next topic of discussion is the debris flow. Now debris flow is a pseudoplastic flow, and I repeat, debris flow is a pseudoplastic flow, and it always, a debris flow will have a yield strength. Any pseudoplastic flow, it has to overcome the yield strength. Yield strength, you may remember the first class, I had drawn a diagram that any plastic or thixotropic flow, it has to cross a yield strength and then it starts. Now, debris flow has a yield strength, and after that yield strength is crossed, then the debris flow starts. Okay. Now, what is the difference between the turbidity current and debris flow? Whereas in the turbidity current, it was the fluid turbulence that was keeping the sediment in suspension, fluid turbulence. A debris flow is a high density flow, and it cannot allow a turbulence to operate. So in a debris flow, it is the matrix strength that basically, suppose what is a matrix strength? I just compare it just like a train. A train is moving and all passengers are moving with that. You are not moving on your own. A train is moving, and as a passenger, you are moving with that. Same is a debris flow. It is a thixotropic flow, and the entire flow, because of its matrix strength, it is moving and it is carrying the sediment that is basically holded within this flow. And that normally a debris flow density, it varies from 1.3 to 1.5 gram per cc. That is the general density of a debris flow, 1.3 to 1.5 cc. What will be the product of a debris flow? The product of a debris flow is a conglomerate. Product of a debris flow is a conglomerate, and normally a product of debris flow is a matrix supported conglomerate. Matrix supported conglomerate. Now, like unlike the turbidity current, which is a turbulent flow, debris flow is likely to be a laminar flow. Laminar flow. So because it is a laminar flow, it will be always a non-erosive flow. Non-erosive flow. There will never be any erosional feature at the base of a debris flow product. Because it is a laminar flow, it is a high strength flow, high viscosity flow, and it will not be the effect, the turbulence or the erosional effect will not be there in a debris flow. Is there any question here? If there is any question, please ask me. So what will be the fundamental difference between a turbidity flow and a debris flow? A turbidity flow will be erosional at its base. I will be seeing the product such as flute cast, I will be seeing the tool marks, all these, they will be at the base of a turbidite. But I will never get any erosional feature at the base of a debris flow because it is a laminar flow. And the basic product of a debris flow is a matrix supported conglomerate. Now, debris flow normally are divided into two types. One is a mud flow. Mud flow, if you have in a debris more than 5% mud, then the flow becomes mud flow. And if the mud content is less than 5%, then you call it a proper debris flow. So debris flow also has two different types. One is a mud flow and the proper debris flow, depending on the content of the mud, whether it is less than 5% or more than 5%. Now, this is the product of and debris flow operate in different kind of condition. Debris flow operate in a slump or the scree. Debris flow operate in the deep sea fan. Debris flow operate in the slope fan. In many such places, we will discuss when we come to the environment. We will discuss that what are the different kinds of flow that operate in the different kind of environment. Then comes the grain flow. Grain flow. Now, grain flow is completely different. Grain flow is completely different. Now, grain flow always happens in a very restricted grain size. In a very restricted, that is from fine to medium sand, and very well sorted sand. When the sand is very well sorted, grain flow, I repeat, will always be from a fine to medium sand and very well sorted sand. Now, what happens in a debris flow? In a grain flow, what happens in a grain flow? In a grain flow, actually the grains are kept in suspension by their dispersive pressure. Dispersive pressure. That means there are large number of grains and they are all interacting with one another. And then because the grains are interacting with one another, so they are basically keeping one another afloat, and not allowing the grains to settle. Now, what happens this is what is called the dispersive pressure. Dispersive pressure. Now, what happens that if there is a few grains which are relatively smaller in size in the distribution, then they will be trickling down the sieve that will be formed by the mutual interaction of these grains. That means the relatively fine grain, they will trickle down. And a grain flow will characteristically show a incipient reverse graded character. Because of the dispersive pressure, the grains are keeping each one another afloat, and their interspace, the finer grains are going down, which we commonly refer to as kinetic sieving. We call it kinetic sieving. This kinetic sieving, it is actually responsible for the formation of the reverse graded bed of the debris of the grain flow. Now, this grain flow is operative in both the subaerial and subaqueous condition. In case of the what we see that the T by P is equal to tan alpha. This is T by P equal to tan alpha. This is actually the relationship of a grain flow, where T, that is the shear stress of the flow, P is the pressure, that is the dispersive pressure between the grains, and T by P, this is related to the tan alpha, where alpha is the angle of internal friction. So T is the shear stress, P is the dispersive pressure, alpha is the angle of internal friction. And depending on that, the grain flow that will be operative both in the subaerial and subaqueous condition. In subaerial condition, you require at least 30-degree inclination for the initiation of a debris flow. That the 30-degree is in a subaerial condition, that is the angle of internal friction. Minimum requirement is 30-degree for the initiation of a subaerial grain flow. In case of the subaqueous, this angle requirement further reduces, and we can generate at 18 to 22 degree in a subaqueous condition, the grain flow starts. Now, when we get a cross stratification of a particular ripple, actually the flow that forms the cross stratification, that is a grain flow. A cross stratification is formed by the grain flow. Okay, is there any question?
So what is the angle requirement for subaqueous flow?
18 to 22 degree is the subaqueous grain flow requirement. In case of subaerial, you require at least 30 degree for generation of the subaerial grain flow. Now, what will be the character of a grain flow product? Normally, a grain flow product that will be reasonably well sorted, moderate to well sorted. That is the first character. Whereas a debris flow will be very poorly sorted. Debris flow will be poorly sorted. Even your turbidity current deposit, that will also be poorly sorted. Whereas a grain flow will be well sorted, moderate to well sorted. This is number one. The grain flow, the thickness of a grain flow deposit always will be very low, because you can understand that the flow is operating by the dispersive pressure, and this dispersive pressure cannot withstand a huge overlying load. With a overlying load, a dispersive pressure cannot operate. So always, habitually, a grain flow will be very low in thickness. The thickness of the bed of the grain flow is always very low, and a grain flow is basically represented by reasonably well sorted sandstone and the reverse graded bed. Okay, and another thing I am missing, there will be no erosional feature at the base of the flow. There will be no, there is no turbulence, there is no erosional activity by this flow, because the flow is sustaining itself. It is a self-sustained flow. Now, after this, we get the liquefied flow. Liquefied flow. Now, what is a liquefied flow? Liquefied flow is that any flow deposit, if after the settlement of the any sediment, the sediment is jerked. The jerking may be because of a earthquake siege, jerking may be because of the wave pounding, or any settled sediment. It is not consolidated, it is unconsolidated form, and in that case the sediment is jerked. I just give you an example. You take sand and water mixture in a glass, and then you allow the sand to settle. After settlement of the sand, if you again jerk the glass, that means you are again disturbing that settled sediment. Exactly, that is what happens in a liquefied flow. When you have sediment, then the pore water, which was originally trapped during its initial settlement, that pore water pressure increases, and that pressure causes the pore water to be released from the flow. This release of pore water generates the liquefied flow. Am I clear? That because of the jerking, the pore water pressure increases, and the increase in the pore water pressure, that causes the liquefaction of the flow. This is very common in case of the soil liquefaction, is a very common process, which we also call the solidification during the earthquake, and the land movement because of solidification, that is also very common. Now, this liquefied flow commonly is most effective in the fine sand. That is most important in the fine sand. I will show you. You can see this graph. You can see this. Can you see this graph?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this graph clearly shows the different grain sizes and the cohesion and the permeability curve. The permeability curve, it is decreasing from the granule to the mud, and your cohesion, that is decreasing from the mud to the granule. So this is the relationship. This is a typical relationship of the cohesion and the permeability. Okay, so what is happening? You first draw the curve and let me know. Once you draw, then I am explaining.
So what is written on the vertical axis?
That is high. Both the thing, that is higher value. Is it done?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what is happening in this diagram? That if you go from granule to mud, your permeability decreases. So if water pressure increases, then if permeability is high, the water will go out of the system and the water will not remain in the system. And if your cohesion is high, then the generation of water pressure in this high cohesive sediment is very, very difficult. So you require such kind of sediment where neither the permeability is very high so that the water pressure, if you increase, that goes out, or the cohesion is very high that the water pressure generation itself become a problem. So what will happen? That the most favorable grain size where both the cohesion and the permeability, they are at the minimum and that fulfills both the requirement, that is the fine sand. That is the fine sand, and there you get the best of liquefaction that is effective. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So always what you will see that the fine sand is the best suitable grain that basically is respond to this liquefaction process is the fine sand, maximum medium sand. That is the target sediment for the liquefaction. Now, what is the product of liquefaction? Normally, what you get in a liquefied sandstone, it becomes a massive bed. Because if you increase the water pressure, it will be totally destroying all the structure that may be present within the sandstone. And in case of sandstone, in case of sedimentology, when we refer to as a massive sand, that means a sand is not heavy. Sand is without any structure. That we call massive. We do not call that a sand is more heavy, so it is massive. No. When the sand doesn't have any structure, we call it a massive sand. So a liquefied sand body, normally it will always show you a massive character, loss of most of the structure. It will be fine sand to medium sand grade, and these sand bodies will not have any kind of erosional base or the erosional top. They will be sharp, non-erosional base and top. Sharp, non-erosional base and top. Fine. Now, the last what I intend to discuss is the fluidized flow. Fluidized flow. Now, again, I come back to the example what I have given, that if you take sand in a glass and then jerk it and then again allow it to settle, then what will happen? The water above the sand, if you allow it to settle, the water above the sand, that you will feel that it will become more dirty. it will become more dirty, and finer particles within the sand that has been sent to the upper fluid. This fluid part, if it get detached from the underlying sediment part, that flow we call it a fluidized flow. I repeat that any liquefied flow, when it gets settled, the excess pore pressure, when it come out with the finest of the sediment from the liquefied flow and get detached from the liquefied flow, that flow is called the fluidized flow. Am I clear?
No, sir. Can you repeat this?
No, sir.
I repeat again. As I started my discussion, that I took a glass and I took a mixture of sand and water. Then I allowed the glass to settle. Okay, the sand is settled. Then I again jarred the glass. As I jarred the glass, that the sediment again come into suspension, and again that sediment gets settled. Now, if you see the resettled sediment, they will make lesser volume than the original sediment. Always the resettled sediment will have the lesser volume than the original sediment. Now, what is happening? That you increase the pore water pressure, and that increased pore water pressure made a liquefied flow. Now, once the liquefied flow settled and it take the lesser volume, then the finer particles in the liquefied flow that has come up, you will see the upper water of the glass. It is more dirty now, and the water, this water, if we get separate from the underlying flow, that water that makes the liquefied flow. So a liquefied flow, when it gets settled and it releases its water with fine sediment, and that water, when it gets separated out from the liquefied flow, that becomes the fluidized flow. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Now this flow is of extremely low density. Extremely low density, and this flow has very little product left. It is not very easy to find the product of fluidized flow. In nature, in modern, the generation of fluidized flow is noticed, but in the geological rock record, the fluidized flow description is very, very less, because the preservation, because the sediment content becomes so low that it hardly leave any product. But if I get a product, what will be the character? It will be the finest of the sizes, but a very fine sand to silt. That I should get, and you will get a large number of water escape structures such as convolutes, the flame structures, all these. I will be discussing a little bit of structure today. So all these, that what the structure talks about, the release of water, all these release of water structures, that you will be basically the sand dike and all these structures you will be getting in this sandstone. But description of fluidized flow product from geological rock record is very, very low, very, very low. Okay. So with this, we actually end the sediment and fluid gravity flows. Sediment and fluid gravity flows. We discuss the Newtonian flow. We end the sediment and the fluid gravity flow. Now, after this, in our course, we have the sedimentary structure. Now, sedimentary structure, it is such a topic that every one of you have gone through in your undergraduate course. Every one of you have gone through that. So I will not go into the detail of the sedimentary structure. What I will be discussing with you is what I know that you people do not know. That I will ask the question, and I will try to understand that how much sedimentary structure actually you know. So it will be not a monologue, it will be a dialogue based discussion. I will ask question, you will be giving me answer. Okay, And by that way, we will be for half an hour, I will be basically taking the sedimentary structure, just for half an hour. Sedimentary structure, it will be interactive, not a monologue. Now, first I give a introduction. A sedimentary structure, it can be a bedding plane structure, it can be a intrabed structure, it can be a soil structure. So three types of sedimentary structures we get. Number one, that is the bedding plane structure. Number two is the intrabed structure. Number three is the soil structure. You name me two bedding plane structure. Two bedding plane structure, any one of you tell me.
So plain bed and cross beds.
Absolutely wrong. Anyone else?
Laminations.
Absolutely wrong. Any other?
So graded
Massive
bed
bedding.
and
Wrong. Do anyone have any idea about the bedding plane structure? Bed top structure?
mud cracks.
Yeah, it is one of the mud cracks, but it is not a syngenetic structure. I am talking about the depositional structure. I am not talking about any other structure. I am now concentrating only on depositional structure. Tell me two bedding plane depositional structure. Structures which we can observe on the bedding plane.
Ripples.
Yeah, that is a bed form. That is a bed form. That is, I am talking the two structure. Yes, ripple is a form. That is a bed form. Bed form, it is the form of a bed. As you are saying the plain bed, similarly ripple is a form of a bed. You understand what is the meaning of bed form? The form of a bed. Form of a bed is ripple. Form of a bed is plain. That is called bed form. Please try to get the concepts clear. Please try to get the concepts clear. I am repeating time and again. Now, so I discussed that is number one, the two bedding plane structure. I just named two bedding plane structure. One is parting lineation. Number two is current crescent. These are two what we get in the bedding plane. On the bedding plane. Okay? Parting lineation and current crescent. Now you tell me the intrabed structure, depositional intrabed structure.
Cross beds.
Cross beds. Anything else?
So flame structure?
I said depositional. Flame structure is a syn-sedimentary deformational structure. Lamination, massive bed, cross-stratified bed. All these are depositional intrabed structure. And there are soil structure. Which are at the base of the bed. You tell me soil structures are of two different types. One is a fluid soil structure, another is a tool marks. You name me two different fluid driven soil structure.
So ball and pillar.
Wrong. Soil structure. We are discussing about soil structure. Ball and pillar is not a soil structure.
So flute and cast.
Flute cast. Another?
So note cast.
Wrong. Flute cast and gutter mark. gutter mark, which are formed by the fluid action. And there are a number of tool marks such as bounce mark, brush mark, prod mark, rolling mark, skipping mark. I repeat, bounce mark, brush mark, prod mark, rolling mark, skipping mark. Now, we will discuss first from the bed top structure. Then we will come to interbed structure. I could get what you people know in the sedimentary structure. मेरे को idea मिल गया. I got the idea. कितना आता है? We will discuss from the bed top structure, interbed structure, and soil structure. This is all I am talking about, which is formed by a flow. I repeat, I am seeing that you people are confusing about the syn sedimentary deformation structure. You are confusing about the diagenetic structure. All these you are confusing with the depositional structure. I am only talking about the depositional structure now. That the flow and its deposition, what structures that form. Okay. So I discussed with you the two structures which form on the bedding plane. One is a parting lineation, and second is the current crescent. So I draw the diagram. Parting lineation and current crescent. Both are bed top structure. Always it is found at the bedding plane, on the bedding plane. Now this is parting lineation and this is current crescent. Both these structures, they form in upper flow regime. Both these structures, they form in upper flow regime. And as you know, what is upper flow regime? That is the in-phase flow. In-phase flow, flow velocity high, flow depth low. Flow velocity high and flow depth low. Now, what happens in case of parting lineation? That at very low depth and high flow velocity, the flow develop, the flow streaks. Flow streaks are developed. And there are high velocity vortex that basically moves in these flow streaks. High velocity vortex that moves. These vortex sometimes converge, sometimes diverge. These vortex sometimes converge and sometimes diverge. Where the vortex, two adjacent vortex, they diverge, they take away 1 or 2 grain from the surface of the bed. And where they converge, they deposit that grain on the surface. And in the process, a very low amplitude, 1 to 2 grain altitude, ridges are formed on the surface of the bed. 1 to 2 grain high, ridges are formed on the surface of the bed, which are called the parting lineation, a typical product of upper stage plane bed. typical product of upper stage plane bed. I do not know you people after admission. I do not know how you people visited the department. After admission, some of you must have come, and there are large number of people from our department. If you move towards the Patel Chase and the pavement, there are a large number of blocks which are from the Marwar Basin. The blocks, and they are the beautiful development of parting lineation on that blocks can be seen. Now, this is current crescent. And this current crescent is formed when the flow depth is low and there is a obstruction of the flow. If there is an obstruction, that means height of the obstructions is more than the depth of the flow gets diverted. Flow gets diverted, a vortex is formed and the flow gets diverted. So the vortex, the sediment what is eroded from here, that get deposited with the flow expansion in the down current direction in the form of a current crescent or the horseshoe. So this is a current crescent which is again absolutely a bedding surface structure. And it will never be interbed structure. It will never, you will get it at the base of the bed. You will always get it at the top of the bed is the bedding plane structure. So a parting lineation, and both these structures, they are actually erosional structure and are formed at the upper stage or the upper flow region. Any question here? Is it a repetition of your already available knowledge, or if it is not, please let me know. Just don't waste time.
No, sir, we have not studied.
Okay. So these are the structures that you get in the bedding plane, and I tell you where these structures mostly we get. We get it in the beach, where the waves, they break, they form the swash and backwash. And swash and backwash, these two are very high energy flow. If you go to beach and if you stand on the beach, you will see that the waves are breaking and the very rapidly water is flowing, and it is actually taking the sand below your foot. All of you must have experienced that. Which we call the swash current. And those type of flow I am talking about, that is the upper stage flow. That is the high energy, the upper flow region condition. That is a very shallow depth and high velocity flow. There you get this kind of a structure to be formed. Another structure formed, that is called rhombic ripple. What happens really, that this parting lineation, this parting lineation, this is what is rhombic ripple, that this parting lineation in swash and backwash, these two flow, they exactly do not take the same path. They take a little diverted path, and two sets of parting lineations that intersect with one another, which we popularly know as a rhombic ripple. These are nothing but two different sets of parting lineation. Though it is named ripple, it is not ripple. They are two sets of parting lineation. They are at a relation like this, and this is also called this is also a product on the beach, rhombic ripple. Now I come on to the intrabed structure, and you people rightly said that most exquisite intrabed structure are cross stratification. Now I basically draw two different cross stratification. Two different cross stratification geometry. You name the two. What will be the name of it and what will be the name of it? क्या cross stratification बोलेंगे इसको?
So first one is struct cross sets and the other one is tabular.
Wrong. The first one is called planar carved. Second one is called planar tabular. Why it is planar carved? Because the said boundaries are planar. That's why it is planar. And the geometry of cross stratification is carved. So it is called planar carved. This is planar tabular because the said boundary is planar and the geometry is tabular. So it is planar tabular. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is how we basically term. If I say I will be now drawing the trough, and what is trough that I will be showing. So it is planar carved and it is planar tabular. Whenever you are describing a cross stratification, you have to describe its set boundary, whether it is planar or not, and the geometry of the cross stratification. Now come on to this. If you have already drawn, then please let me know.
सर थोड़ा सा ऊपर कर लीजिए.
मैं क्लास ले रहा हूँ, थोड़ी देर बाद कल करता हूँ.
Done, sir.
Okay. I will just take 1 minute leave from you. I am just joining. Just joining. Okay. So the topmost diagram, that is a trap cross stratification. Actually, a trap is a product of a lunate or linguate ripple. Now, what is a lunate or linguate ripple? It is a curved crested ripple, which I have drawn below, that it can be either the closure of the curved crest, it can be in the down current direction or in the up current direction. So depending on that, whether it is a down current or up current closure, you name it either the lunate or linguate. Now, trap is a product of lunate or linguate ripple. If you cut it, then you get, this is what is called the trap cross stratification. Some people also refer it as a festoon cross stratification. But this festoon cross stratification will not tell you whether the current is flowing towards this side or towards this side. Actually, the bedding plane cross section, if you draw the tangent of the two different sides, can you see the paper? Can you see the paper?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
If I draw a tangent on this, and where the two tangent meet, through that is the resultant line. This resultant line actually talk about the possible current orientation, but whether the current is toward this side or current towards this side, that you cannot identify from this cross stratification. Now, for identification that whether the current is toward this side or that side, you have to see this section, which is perpendicular to it. And the planar curve cross stratification, what you will be seeing on this, that will tell you that whether it is dipping this side or dipping that side, that will tell you that current was flowing this side or that side. So from one section of a trap, the current direction cannot be identified. You need to have two perpendicular section of a trap to identify what is the direction of the current. Am I clear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Okay. This is the first.
Yes, sir.
This is the first thing. Secondly, suppose what is this? This is a straight crested bed form. This is what we call the straight crested bed form. A straight crested bed form, as you increase the velocity of the flow, then the crest line that first starts curving. So then you call the sinuous crested bed form. And at finally this line, they detach from one another and you get this lunate and linguate. So the straight crest to the curved crest to lunate and linguate, this is a series of the bed form that is a product of increasing velocity of the current. These are all current ripples. I am talking about the current ripple. Okay? And these are all the product of increasing velocity of the current that you get this cross stratification. Okay, these are all why I call it a current ripple. What is the geometry of a current ripple? This is a current ripple. This is a current ripple. You all know that this is a current ripple. Okay. Now, one is a Stoss side, that is the long, low angle side, and another is the Lee side, that is the steeper side. Now, what is happening? That there is a crest point, which is the highest point, and there is a point of flow separation, where if you have a flow, the flow is getting separated here. So this is what is flow separation. This point where the flow separation takes place, we call it a brink point. Brink point. What is the point of flow separation? Now, if I draw the boundary layer condition, you can see the boundary layer I have drawn here, and also drawn here. So what is happening? That once the flow is detaching, then as it is striking the ground, one component of the flow is trying to move up the Lee slope, and the other component that will go to the next bed form. So this one component which will try to move back, that is what we call the return flow. And that is also apparent in the boundary layer reconstruction. You can see that the one flow that is at the basal part, that is moving up the Lee, and the other component that is moving towards the front. Is there any question here? Okay. Now, what will happen when this is happening? You know that the Stoss will be eroded and Lee will be deposited. Stoss will be eroded and Lee will be deposited. Stoss will be eroded and Lee will be. This is what we all know. The Stoss eroded and Lee deposited. Okay. So, what is a cross stratification? It is a isochronous unit or a diachronous unit. A cross stratification is a isochronous unit or a diachronous unit. You understand isochronous and diachronous? Hello? Hello?
No, sir.
Isochronous means a plane. Hello. Isochronous means a plane which represents one single time. A diachronous means which cuts across the timeline. That is called diachronous. A diachronous unit is that unit which cuts across the timeline, whereas the isochronous unit is that represents a single time. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now tell me that a cross stratification is a isochronous unit or a diachronous unit?
The diachronous unit.
Yes, diachronous. Why? Why? Suppose this waveform is moving. This is a ripple which is moving. This is a current ripple which is moving. At time t1, the ripple was here. At time t2, the ripple was here. At time t3, ripple was here. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, when the ripple has reached at the time t3, was there t1 and t2? t1, t2 तो है नहीं. So when the ripple is in time in t3, then the ripple is here, and the t1 and t2, they are actually present within the ripple in the form of cross stratification. Because at the time of t3, t1, t2 तो है नहीं. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is T1 and T2? They are timelines. What is T1 and T2? They are timelines.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So when I draw a cross stratification, when I draw a set of cross stratification, the cross stratification are timelines. And the cross stratified bed is a diachronous unit. The timelines is cutting across this unit. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So that is why a cross stratification is a diachronous unit. Okay? Okay?
Okay, sir.
Fine. Now, what I have taken in this diagram, that the amount of volume that is eroded from the stoss, the same amount is deposited in the Lee. Isn't it? Whatever amount, if V1 is eroded from stoss, the V1 amount is deposited on the Lee. Who said that will happen always? Who said that will happen? There will be no suspension, nothing. Only जो stoss से erode हो रहा है वही deposit हो रहा है, and there is no suspension load. Can you have any natural situation like that? You cannot. You cannot. It is a completely hypothetical situation. If only that amount which is eroded from stoss that is deposited in the Lee, then any ripple, any cross stratified set that would not have been more than the wavelength of a single ripple. कोई भी क्रॉस स्ट्रैटिफाइड बेड हम लोगों को नहीं मिलता इन द जियोलॉजिकल रिकॉर्ड जो एक रिपल की वेवलेंथ की बराबर है, उससे ज्यादा नहीं मिलता, क्योंकि ओनली द लास्ट प्रोडक्ट वुड हैव बीन प्रिजर्व्ड, ऑल अर्लियर प्रोडक्ट वुड हैव बीन इरेज्ड. But we get cross stratified unit which are running after 10 to 20 or hundreds of meters running laterally a cross stratified bed. We get how that is formed. How that is formed? If I only have a stoss erosion and Lee deposition, as I have drawn this figure, I do not know whether you are understanding what I am trying to say. As I have drawn this figure, there is only stoss erosion and Lee deposition, and the bed form is migrating. And as it is migrated and reached T3, then T1, T2 all are not present. So final record जो जियोलॉजिकल रिकॉर्ड में प्रिजर्व होगा वो होगा T3. And what will be the T3? जिसमें all earlier records are present in the form of cross stratification. Now what will be T3? T3 will be the wavelength of a single ripple. इससे ज्यादा कोई रिपल क्रॉस स्ट्रैटा लैटरल एक्सटेंट हम लोग को कभी मिलेगा ही नहीं, बट मिलते हैं. we get the cross stratifications running for several meters. We get it. How we get it? How we get it? That is my question. How we get it? How we get it? Am I clear what I am saying? Is it clear to you? मैं जो बोलने का कोशिश कर रहा हूं वो समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you understand the problem. And you understand the problem that how we get a cross stratification unit which is running for several meters or several tens of meters. This is only explained. This is only explained by a process called ripple climbing. Ripple climbing. Now, what is ripple climbing? How ripple climbs, and that ripple climbing give us these cross stratifications which runs for several meters or tens of meters. Now, what is happening in ripple climbing? The amount of sediment which you are eroding from straws, more amount is getting deposited on the lea because the excess amount is coming from suspension. So what will happen? That if there is a ripple, the next ripple that will come. So now you see that one ripple, the next ripple, it is not coming back to the same level. It is slightly above it. The third one is further above it. Why? There is a del V excess amount that is depositing from the suspension. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
This is what is called ripple climbing. That ripple is climbing, and so the entire ripple set, it has now started climbing from the base because of the excess. Now, if you have the angle of climb, if suppose there are three types of climbing. One is subcritical climbing, then critical climbing, and supercritical climbing. What is happening? When the angle of climb, that angle, that is the phi, that is less than the Stoss angle psi. When the climb angle is less than the Stoss angle, that is psi, you call it a subcritical climbing. When the climb angle phi is equal to the Stoss angle psi, then you call it as critical climbing. And when the climb angle phi that is more than the Stoss angle, you call it a supercritical climbing. You call it a supercritical climbing. I will now show you what will be the result of individual cases. What will be the result of individual cases? I will tell you. Tell me after you draw the figures.
So done.
Done. Now, first you draw it, then I explain.
Yes, sir, we have done.
Okay. So first I tried to show you what is actually geometry of a full-scale cross-stratification. A cross-stratification will have a top set, a fourth set, and a bottom set. But this top set, fourth set, bottom set, we always do not get when we get a cross-stratification. Sometimes we get a planar tabular, sometimes planar curve, sometimes we get sigmoidal geometry. Is this different geometry of cross-stratification is just a freak? No, it is not a freak. There is a definite control that what kind of geometry of a cross-stratification I will get. So that I exactly wanted to show you that how it is controlled, First, subcritical. You can see that here you are only getting the fourth set and the bottom set. You can also get only the fourth set, then you call it a planar tabular. When you have the fourth set and bottom set, then you call it a planar curved. But you will never get the top set because your angle of climb is less than the Stoss angle. So there is no question of getting the top set. You only get the fourth set and the bottom set. Is it clear? So the planar tabular and planar curve cross stratification, they are product of this subcritical climbing. Now I come to the critical climbing. that the climbing is at the Stoss angle. So now you are allowing the top set to be preserved. And the shape of the cross stratification, that will be sigmoidal, where you have the top set, fourth set, and the bottom set. And you get the sigmoidal geometry of the cross stratification, a typical signature that you are getting a critical climbing. So you can see the planar crabular, planar carved, sigmoidal. Are this cross stratification is a freak? No. There is a definite relation of the climbing of the bed form and the cross strata geometry. Now, coming on to the supercritical, where the climbing angle is more than the Stoss angle. That means your entire bed form that is getting buried in the suspension settlement. So the suspension settlement is so high that the your bed form is getting starved. It cannot move. It becomes stagnant. And then you get the lenticular of the pleasure bedding. Lenticular of the pleasure bedding, where the bed forms, they are actually getting starved within the high suspension sediment load, and they are forming the lenticular and the pleasure bedding, a typical product of the we normally get in the tidal environment, where large is a low energy with high suspension load. This is a very typical of the tidal environment. So I think I could tell you the beauty of the cross stratification. That what is cross stratification is not that there is a there it is forms an angle and it is called cross stratification. There is much more beauty in the cross stratification. Whatever I could say in this short span, I could tell. Now there is trap cross. This is what I was discussing all with the straight crested bed form. You have a trap cross stratification, which is the curved crested bed form. And that trap cross stratification, that how we identify the paleocurrent, that I have also discussed. Now, I come on to there are two others intrabed structure. One is a massive. A bed can be massive, no structure. The most difficult to explain how this kind of bed is formed. There can be different reasons for formation of this bed. It can be a liquefied flow. It can be a thoroughly burrowed bed, so which are destroyed all the structure. It can be a seismite. So a massive bed is the most difficult to explain. You can also have the plain laminated bed. The laminations are plain laminations. That is also a intrabed structure, that the laminations are the intrabed structure. So cross stratification, massiveness, and plain lamination, all three are intrabed structure. Okay. Now come on to the bed bottom structure, that is the soul marks. There, as I discussed earlier, there are two types of soul marks. One is the fluid generated, Another is tool generated, Fluid generated, I said that this is flute mark and gutter. Tool mark, there is bounce. Brass. Then prod. And then rolling. Tell me once you complete the drawing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, first the fluid generated. Fluid generated, I have said flute mark and gutter cast. Now, one thing is absolutely necessary for these two structures to be formed, that the succession has to be a sandstone shell alternate succession. If it is a completely shell or completely sandstone, you cannot have this kind of structure, because the structures are actually erosional structure formed on the mud surface, and then it is filled by the sand from above. So a flow which actually erodes the mud surface and by the erosional process loses its energy and deposits the sediment which is in suspension in it, that flow actually forms this kind of structure. So a sand mud alternation is absolutely necessary for formation of this structure. Now, in case of a flute, you have a steeper flank and a gentle flank, and the direction of gentle flank is the direction of the paleocurrent. So the direction of gentle flank is the direction of the paleocurrent, because you are actually eroding a muddy surface. You are scooping the muddy surface, and then the scoop is filled by the sediment that is carried in the flow. So that scoop direction is the direction of the. But in case of a gutter, there is no, you can have direction on both sides. The gutter do not have a flaring direction. Gutter is always it is a typical of a storm flow. Gutters are typical product associated with the storm flow, and they do not never it shows any flaring. So there is always a trend of gutter, no direction. Flute can give you a direction, gutter can only give you a trend. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these two are fluid. Fluid is causing these soil marks. Fluid is causing these soil marks. So now I have discussed that the bed top structure by fluid. I have discussed the interbed structure by fluid. Now the soil structure by fluid. Okay. Now besides this, there are a series of tool structure. I am not going into series of tool structure. You people have read that in the graduation. I have only drawn, and just I am saying the tool structure, that is a brass structure, will always have a ridge in the up current, in the down current direction. A brass structure will, so if you identify a brass structure and you are identifying a ridge, then you are identifying that is the down current direction. A prod structure will always have a asymmetrical group, and the steeper side is always the down current direction. Steeper side is always the down current direction. Otherwise, bounce, rolling and skipping, they cannot give you any paleocurrent direction. They can only mark that they are the tool marks. Only brass and prod, these are the tool marks that can give you also a paleocurrent direction. I think this is the only thing I wanted to tell about the tool marks, which might not have been told to you in your undergraduation. That brass and prod mark are the two tool marks that can be used in the paleocurrent measurement. Others are non-decisive and cannot be used in the paleocurrent direction. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Now because it is already going to be 1.5 hours, I will stop after 1.5 hours. The last topic today I am discussing, that is the syn sedimentary deformation structure. There are two types of syn sedimentary deformation structure. One is intrabed, another is interbed. Intrabed and interbed. Please let me know when you completed the drawing.
So what we have written after syn sedimentary?
Dike.
Done, sir.
Okay. So intrabed structure, that means the structure is formed within a bed, and one measure is the convolute and flame. I am not going into detail because you know what is convolute, but they are intrabed structure. When it all depends that the degree of liquefaction, as I discussed the liquefaction earlier, degree of liquefaction, depending on that, whether convolutes will be conjoined or they are separated, then you call it a dish and pillar. And the pillars are nothing but the syn sedimentary dike. These are the water escape paths. And there are other structures also, that is the overturned cross stratification. That is also intrabed. That is overturned cross stratification. A very common overturned cross stratification, very common in aeolian sand, very common in aeolian sand. Mackey has experimented that how it happens. What happens really, you have drawn it, na? You have drawn it. Overturned cross stratification. Overturned. Overturned cross strata.
Yes, sir.
What Mackey has shown that on a cross stratified sand, he took a sand bag and pulled the sand bag on the cross stratified sand. What? There is a cross stratified sand. There is a cross stratified sand and a sand bag full of sand that is pulled above that. What is seen that the shear stress, it will be dropping. Shear stress will be maximum. The shear stress that will be dropping, that the top portion, it will be mostly dragged, and the lesser and lesser drag as you go down into the bed because of the shear. So a overturned cross stratification need a fluid shear above it. It is a thin sedimentary just after deposition but before consolidation. You require a fluid shear above it, which will cause that the cross stratification to be bent at the top. Typical of the fluvial sand. In the fluvial sandstone, we get this kind of thin sedimentary deformation structure. Okay. Now, interbed structure. These are all interbed structure. Again, the product of the liquefaction. That you have a sand bed above the mud bed, and there is liquefaction. Both become liquefied, and sand being the heavier, it will be loaded within the shell. If the loading is very high, then the load ball, it will get separated. Otherwise, it remains as a load. Now, if you are on a sloping surface, the load will have a asymmetric form. If you are on a planar surface, load will have a symmetric form. So the asymmetricity of the load, sometimes people have used for identification of the gradient of the surface on which this liquefaction has taken place. These structures are very, very useful for identification of paleoseismic event. If these structures are found running for several tens to hundreds to kilometers, at a stretch, I am getting a strata which is subsediment deformed. That kind of structure people have identified as a paleoseismic event. Otherwise, it can be a local liquefaction, it can be a product of the slope failure, and all these different kind of disturbances. These are all thin sedimentary deformation structures. If you have any question, you can ask me.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I have a question regarding books. Sir, which book should we prefer?
This
To study this.
sedimentary structure, you should read the book of Collinson and Thompson. Sedimentary structure. Collinson and Thompson, the sedimentary structure. And the earlier what I have discussed today, that the different flows, the turbidity current, debris flow, and all these flows, those you can consult the book of Sam Box, Gary Nichols, Harold Reading, Sam Box, Gary Nichols, Harold Reading. All these books you may be consulting, you may consult during the entire course that I will be taking. I will not follow any particular book. Basically, as you can see, this is how I will be teaching. No, whatever my knowledge that I will be sharing with you. Okay. Now, I need an extra class on Monday. Hello?
Yes, sir.
So Monday at what time you
Sir.
people?
Sir, in the morning, 9:30 to 11:30.
9:30. So as usual, I join at 10. So Monday at 10, we will have a class.
Okay, sir.
Monday at 10, we will have a class. Okay. 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 So good night.